Okay, welcome back to Ask a Monk, Monk Radio, where we will be answering questions on Buddhism, meditation, and the monastic life. So if you're interested in asking questions, you can go to radio.sirimangalo.org. You can go there anytime during the week, actually. And there is a Google moderator frame where you can input your questions and people vote on them. You can also vote on other people's questions. And as the popular ones rise to the top, I will answer them in that order. So we'll go for about, let's say, an hour and a half. And we'll do this every week on Saturdays. If you've been keeping up, then you probably know that. The sessions are recorded on YouTube, so you might be watching this after the fact. And please don't post answers in the comment section, because I don't ever get around to answering them there. Best way to ask questions is to go to radio.sirimangalo.org and ask the questions there. So let's get started. The other thing is I will be recording each question as a separate video and uploading those to YouTube throughout the week. Let's start with the first question. Bhante, Buddhism emphasizes a good and respectful relationship with parents, and the opposite of that can create terrible karma. But how should a child, now an adult, act when he or she had a bad parent, alcoholic, unfair, or abusive, for example? Well, one of the reasons, well, there's many different aspects to this question that we have to understand. The first one, and probably the most important, is the ability to, or the importance of differentiating between your circumstances and your actions. So there are, well, the vast majority of us are brought into this world in less than ideal circumstances, to say the least. Some people are born in terrible circumstances. It's important not to confuse that with how with your responsibility or your own actions. So in other words, not to let that drag you down, to say, I am unlucky, or my life sucks, my life is terrible, and so on, and let that drag you down, and let that determine how you live your life. Because that's what we can't control, and that is merely a product of where we are in this moment, where we're coming from. So it could be a curve up, and so things are getting better, but then it could be a curve down, and things are getting worse. We could be at a low point. We don't know what the future holds. The circumstances that we find ourselves in are circumstantial, so they don't really have a bearing on us, on our quality of who we are. So the meaning is, there's no excuse, therefore there's no benefit in trying to excuse yourself from or for your behavior based on your situation. Now, it's obviously more likely that people in bad situations are going to behave poorly. Actually, I'm not even sure if that's true. It seems to for some people there's a correlation there, but for some people there's an inverse correlation. So as people do better in life, they act worse, right? People, when they were poor, they were kind and generous because they understood suffering, they understood what it meant to be without. but once they attain to luxury, to opulence, to wealth, they become mean and selfish and addicted to their pleasure. So there's no excuse there. You can't say, I have a bad relationship with such a person, so therefore I should treat them poorly. I mean, that's the implication here. So if you were to ask this about an ordinary person, well, let's rephrase the question and say, I know we're supposed to treat people kindly, but what if someone's really mean to you? Right? Obviously, if you understand anything about the Buddha's teaching, you know that that's not an excuse at all. There's the Buddha himself was our best example of this. How he treated, he said his love for Devadatta, the monk who his cousin who became a monk and tried to kill him, and on several occasions split up the sangha, the followers of the Buddha. Encouraged this prince Ajatasattu to kill his father, and so on and so on. The Buddha said, my love for him is equal to my love for Rahula, my son. And so the idea that you can somehow be excused for treating someone poorly based on because they're just too difficult to deal with is erroneous. The point being that it's not about some judge letting you off and saying, oh, that's okay, you know, I understand how you could be upset at that person because they're really a mean and nasty person. Karma and reality isn't like that. It's harsh, it's cold, it's impersonal. There's no mitigating circumstance, or there's no wiggle room. You know, if you get angry at someone, whether they're a nice person, a good person, or a bad person, the anger, the quality of your mind, is a measure of the bad karma. Now, that's the first thing you have to understand. It's not the whole answer, I don't think, because there is a mitigating factor to how strong your bad intentions are going to be. So if someone's very, very nice to you, or very, very kind to you, has done good things to you, for you, and you harm them, or if someone is pure, is good, whether they've done anything good for you, if they're in general a pure individual, if you harm them, there's a greater disturbance in the force, or disturbance in the force, disturbance in whatever it is that makes up the universe. In your own mind, it requires greater corruption, and so the karma that you create will most likely be more powerful. So while there is no excuse for treating someone poorly, you're less likely to be incredibly corrupt when you get angry at someone who is, or you treat someone poorly who is a nasty person. So, in regards to our parents, there are two reasons that I can think of, or that I understand based on the teaching of the Buddha, as to why it's important to be kind to them. And this should help to answer the question. The first one is in regards to our roles and responsibilities. Our not exactly roles and responsibilities. Let's put it more, those things that lead to social harmony, lead to mental harmony, lead to interpersonal harmony, which we call our responsibilities, or our roles. They are important insofar as they lead to harmony, both inside of ourselves and in the world around us. So without having, or the lack of parents, so parental support, is a very, very bad thing. It's something that causes harm to us. It's something that disrupts a family, disrupts society when parents are no longer caring for their children, looking after their children. And likewise, when children are no longer respecting their parents, when it's a disturbance, it's a chaos, and it's a breeding ground for unwholesomeness. So I think you could probably make a strong case for the amount of unwholesome activity increasing in those families that are dysfunctional. I think it's pretty much a given that there's a general relationship there. Whereas families that are functional, that are supportive, that are respectful, that have a clear sense of respect in terms of and support, so going both ways, are more likely to cultivate wholesomeness. So in that sense, it's going back to where you find yourself. You find yourself being born into a situation where your parents are abusive, alcoholic, are unsupportive to their children. Now, that means here's the perfect family. You're here, or you have lost something of that. Now, this doesn't. No, this just means that your family situation is less than perfect. Now, this question kind of implies that it would be somehow beneficial, therefore, or somehow reasonable to make it even worse, right? Or to take what little potential there is for familial harmony, family harmony, domestic harmony, and reduce it. You see, so the point being, you still have you don't have the ability to control your parents, but each individual in the family has the potential to add or subtract, to benefit or to harm the family. And so this is what you're looking at. So my answer to this question would be in regards to the difference between your poor relationship with your parents, which actually makes things worse, which can't hope to benefit the family, and your patience and forbearance and kindness and compassion and equanimity in the face of an imperfect family situation, which has the potential to benefit the family. And this is the case with all things. When life hands you lemons, make lemonade. You can't change what you're given, but that doesn't mean you should sit back and say, well, I was given a bunch of lemons, so I obviously can't make anything good out of this. I was given a poor hand, dealt a poor hand in life, which actually is, as I said, just a measure of where you are now. It's not a measure of who you are, or it's not an indicator of how you should act at all. So the important thing is how you react, how you behave in regards to the cards that you're dealt, the hand that you're dealt. So that's the first aspect of this question, is that just as a function of creating harmony, it's just like a relationship with anyone, except that there is, I think, room for a sort of parental role that one should accept. So these are my parents, and there is a benefit to respecting them, no matter who they are, in the sense of helping them to fulfill their roles, or supporting them in fulfilling their roles, even if they're crappy at it, even if they're failing at it. You don't help them fulfill that role by having a crappy relation, by responding poorly to them. So anything that you can do to help them to fulfill that role, and you can feel this, you can sense this. It doesn't mean you allow them to be alcoholics or you support them in their alcoholism. It means you find ways to mold the family as best you can, at least insofar as it's your responsibility to do so, which means you aren't responsible for the entire family, but you can at least do your part. By doing that, it's much better to act in that way than to act poorly. So the first part. Second part is, I think there is also, that being said, also room for discrimination, in the sense that if the family, in the sense that one of the other reason why parents are so worthy of our respect is because they're actually worthy of our respect, that they've actually done something to support us. So a parent who had sexual intercourse with your mother and who you've never met, no. So, I mean, in the most extreme case, the man who raped your mother, for that, and who you never met. Obviously, in regards to roles, it would be great if somehow you could get that person to be the father. But that being said, a substitute might be, for example, a stepfather. Now, often due to emotions and relations and connections, that doesn't happen. Step parents are often unable to find the same level of attachment or endearment or caring for their children. But for a person who has been negligent, for a parent who's been negligent, who has been uninvolved with the family, well, the role would have been nice. Sometimes you have to cut your losses and accept a one-parent family where you're not at all related with the parent, and so sometimes it's just making do with what you have. And sometimes the best way to relate to a parent is to stay away from them. And eventually, in many cases, I think especially as one, in most, or in all cases, once one begins to practice the Buddha's teaching, one becomes more and more detached from one's family, because eventually one begins to get this universal sense of love where one treats all beings equally. And so then it's just a matter of responding to people appropriately, and you would respond to your parents as a child should in whatever society you're in, just as a matter of duty. But I think for an abusive parent, there is often, or a negligent parent, there is room to simply say that person's not a part of my life, and I guess to rearrange the roles, or to rearrange the structure of one's family, where one says single parent family or no parent family, if one was put up for adoption or so on. I mean, it gets complicated, you see. So part of it is in regards to the roles and the structure. The other part of it is in regards to the actual relationship. If a parent has been abusive or negligent, then they don't really fulfill all of the greatness that is involved with being a parent. I mean, it was a great thing that your mother carried you for 9 months. It may not have been such a great thing that your father did by inseminating her, or more importantly, in abandoning you at birth, or having never met your father, or so on. So definitely, if you can, you want to try to do your best to create a wholesome family environment. It's just, practically speaking, useful and beneficial and harmonious source of peace. But practically speaking, you sometimes have to cut your losses. And as a Buddhist, I think eventually it means less and less to you. Certainly, I think there's a misunderstanding among many Buddhists that family relations are somehow important and intrinsic to the path, and I think definitely they're not. The teachings that the Buddha gave in regards to family were conventional teachings. There's no sense that any relationship is really important, except maybe one's relationship with one's teacher, which has a sense of being somewhat intrinsically important, if you can put that, or in some sense intrinsically important insofar as it leads one directly to enlightenment. Other relationships are functional and auxiliary and incidental, but important. You know, there's certainly a person who has bad relationship with their parents will have a difficult time practicing. just because of how intense the feelings are, and often the ingratitude that's involved in that. When a parent has been supportive, has tried their best, has done good things, and or when a parent has been abusive, and that affects you, and the person hasn't forgiven, hasn't let go, and still has bitter feelings towards their parents, it creates a chaos in one's mind. It creates a depression, a sadness, an upset, a feeling of low self-worth, and it has a lot of mental repercussions. So often forgiving your parents is a part of that, and so on. So it's certainly something not to be taken lightly, but not something to be dogmatic about either. Parents do have generally a strong relationship with their children. Even psychologically, when the parent who's abandoned you, often it's an important part of your practice just to settle it, to actually go and find that parent and meet them, right? So there's no exact science, but it is a important, weighty sort of aspect of life, part of life, something that you have to take seriously. Anyway, hope that helps. Some thoughts. Why is there ignorance in the first place? I understand that ignorance is the root of all suffering, and that the best way to overcome ignorance is to learn. So I'm wondering, what caused ignorance? Can we even know? Well, there's no original cause to samsara. I don't even think there's a sense that time is entirely linear. It seems like time somehow begins with the present moment, and so we're creating the past as we go, and the future is this also ethereal thing that we're somehow creating. Or even more interestingly, it seems like just as the past can affect the present, the future can also affect the present. So you know how in quantum physics they somehow have seen that it seems like the future is creating the past. Well, there is a sense that because it's possible to have a vision of the future, to see what's going to happen before it happens, there's the sense that the future can actually affect the present by seeing the future, or the future can come back and you can actually see it before it happens. The Buddha was able to do this, and it's possible through meditation, certain types of meditation, that you're able to do that. So anyway, not actually an answer to your question, but if you're looking for a first cause of ignorance, or a first cause of anything, there is no first cause. There is no sense of that. There's no sense that the universe is of that sort. Linear, because it's actually illogical to think of. It's mind-boggling to think of it an infinite timeline, but it's even more difficult, more illogical to think of a first beginning, because then you have to think of something before that, right, or something outside of time, right? You have to think of you have to try to understand what it could possibly mean to for time to begin. Now, I guess there's an understanding among material scientists or natural scientists, modern scientists, that time began with the Big Bang. So if the Big Bang was a singularity, then there was no time before that. But that's really just time as a function of space, right? As a part of the four-dimensional reality that we find ourselves in. But again, that may be a hint of the fact that time is not exactly linear as we think it is. Time is not quite the way we think. So the idea that there might be something at the beginning is a bit of a misunderstanding of reality. If you want to understand the proximate cause of ignorance, the Buddha said it's the 5 hindrances. And I was alerted to this. I've answered this question before, and I said, well, there's no ignorance just is, right? Ignorance, you can't cause someone to not know something, right? If I'm thinking of a number between 1 and 10, and I ask you, what number am I thinking of? No, I didn't cause you to not know what number I'm thinking of. You never knew what number I was thinking of. It was something that was always there. The lack of knowledge was there in the beginning. So I'm not actually convinced by this person who called me out on that, saying, "Oh, you're wrong. There is a cause for ignorance. It's the 5 hindrances." But you have to understand there are 24 different kinds of causality in the Buddhist teaching. And so I was talking about something that created the ignorance, that actually caused the ignorance to spring into existence. But the hindrances are a cause for ignorance, meaning because of the hindrances, we remain ignorant to the truth. Because of our lack of clarity, we remain ignorant. So it's like the fog is preventing us from seeing the road in front of us. But it didn't create that lack of knowledge, right? We never knew what the road in front of us looked like, but then when we get to this point in the road, we still can't see it because there's the fog. So in that way, the hindrances are what is obscuring us from seeing the truth. But we didn't ever know. There wasn't a time or a point where we actually knew the truth, the Four Noble Truths, for example. That isn't something that was ever there. The hindrances are just that which is in our way. Once we go to once we ask the question, what are the Four Noble Truths? What is the truth of reality? We're not able to see it because of the 5 hindrances. That's all. An actual beginning to ignorance is something, it's reasonably speaking a misleading question, misguided question, because ignorance is something that was always there. Ignorance means a lack of something. It's like, why is there a lack of light? What caused there to be a lack of light? Or what caused there to be a lack of sound? Nothing caused it. A lack of something isn't really caused. Though you can say there's a reason for it, maybe we're in a soundproof room and that's why there's no sound. But that's not really telling you why there's no sound. The no sound is the default, right? So I think it's easy to understand this, and therefore I think that's a proper answer to what is the cause of ignorance. Okay, so just a little bit of a recap. We're here on radio.sirimangalo.org answering questions that have been asked. I'm just going to go and take a look at the comments to the video. And we got some spam comments. Hi, that's not a spam comment. So we have 2 questions. It looks like we actually are broadcasting. Good to know. Okay, so I'm going to just continue on here. See if there's anyone actually watching us live. Oh, hey, we have 11 viewers. Welcome, everyone. Okay, next question. Analogy of watching the rising and falling of the abdomen like a hunter waiting for the mind to show up with its tendencies is very useful. It's, I think it's in the commentaries. It may have been from the Buddha himself. I think the Buddha used it as well, but the commentaries talk about this. After a while there is nothing but a pleasant glow. Does wisdom arise spontaneously, or do I need to do more? Yes, but if it were so easy, we could just sit with a pleasant glow and wisdom would arise. No, that pleasant glow is a problem for you because you find it pleasant. The single most common hindrance in meditation that we come across is pleasant sensations. Whenever I go to give a talk somewhere, there'll always be at least one person in the audience who has this problem, who has been practicing maybe for years and feels like they're not getting anywhere because they come to a situation where there is nothing but a pleasant glow. I've answered this question many times on YouTube as well. I'm sure many of you or some of you have listened to this answer and know what I'm going to say. The pleasant glow could be classified as piti, rapture. It could be classified as pleasure, as sukha, happiness. It could be classified as tranquility, though probably not. It depends exactly what the experience is. You describe it as a pleasant glow. I would call that rapture. I would guess that that's probably not just happiness, but it's kind of a static charge, this excitement in the mind. It may be kind of a calm excitement, but there's an energy involved with it. Now, whatever you classify it as, it's an experience. It's an experience that comes as a byproduct of meditation practice. It is impermanent. It is unsatisfying in the sense that it can't last forever. And it's uncontrollable in the sense that you can't turn it on and turn it off. When you sit down and meditate sometimes, or maybe all the time, it comes by itself. It's not yours to control. Now, you happen to be in a situation where it comes often based on the activities that you undertake, but it is not under your control. To confirm that, you can give up your attachment to it and start to say to yourself, happy, happy, or liking, liking, or feeling, feeling, however it presents itself to you. And you'll find if you're persistent in acknowledging both the happiness and the liking of it, that just like everything else, it begins to disappear. But when you don't do that, you're actually encouraging it. And so the question is, well, is that a bad thing? It's a bad thing if you want to gain wisdom, because no, wisdom will not arise unless you're being objective, unless you have a clarity of mind, which you're lacking by enjoying this pleasant glow. Nothing wrong with a glow or a feeling or a sense of rapture. They can actually be quite useful because they provide you with energy and tranquility in the mind. But as soon as you begin to find it pleasant and enjoy it, even subtly, usually it is quite subtle and it doesn't feel like you actually are clinging to it. But 99%, if you're not acknowledging it, then in almost all cases you're clinging to it. And you can realize this by, at the very least, you have delusion about it, an idea that it's me, that it's mine. And by acknowledging feeling, feeling, happy, happy, liking, liking, whatever, however it appears to you, you'll see that it ceases. And you'll see that it isn't, you'll come to realize that it isn't actually something that you can depend upon. It isn't actually the true, it isn't the path, it isn't the true goal of meditation. And that is a piece of wisdom. It's a understanding. So that is wisdom, and that is the path, and that will lead you closer to freedom from suffering. So wisdom is not something that you can that you can create. It's not something that you should try to actively cultivate in the sense of thinking or reflecting or puzzling out reality, asking questions about reality. It is something that will arise by itself, but it will only arise. It will only arise if you are objective, if you have the clarity of mind, which you don't have when you're clinging, when you're enjoying. So be very, very careful about pleasant sensations. They are not the path. I did a video about the 10 of them some time ago called "What the Meditation Is Not," I think, and you can watch that if you want to learn about the others as well. There's lots of good things that can come up that will only get in the way of your practice if you cling to them. Okay, I think I have to, maybe just a second. Just had to change the battery on the camera there. Bante, what is your opinion about sitting through pain? Many teachers advocate it because it creates equanimity, and you learn how to deal with your resistance. And others say it is extreme asceticism and to be avoided. Many thanks. Anyone who says that pain, that the forbearance or the bearing with pain is extremism, is an extreme and therefore in the sense of bad practice, is going against the Buddhist teaching, doesn't understand the Buddhist teaching. Maybe well-meaning, but misguided. The Buddha said clearly in several places that true patience means forbearing against pain, even such that it might take your life, even so extreme that it might kill you. And to understand this, or to verify this, to argue this, we can point to the what do we mean by what is the Buddha's teaching? What is the path that the Buddha taught? It's the path to, my understanding is that it's the path to become completely objective and, let's say, invincible to all experience, such that no experience that arises could possibly be a cause for suffering, that there would be no clinging to any experience whatsoever, no reaction, no emotional reaction to any experience, in the sense of being free, being at complete peace, no matter what arises. You can't do that for as long as painful situations disturb you. So as long as you are averse to any type of pain, or any situation, or even averse to death, you can't attain the goal of the Buddhist teaching. This is only a part of the answer. The other part of the answer is that there certainly may be, along the way to getting to that extreme state, or that ultimate state of true invincibility, there may be cases where you should quite reasonably reduce or change the situation. So there may be situations that, first of all, are overwhelming. So for a novice meditator to insist that they sit still no matter what sensations arise is unreasonable. It is more likely to create unwholesomeness. As long as one is affected by pain. So when a little bit of pain comes up, they start to get upset. If you ask them to sit through extreme pain, instead of cultivating wholesome mindfulness, patience, it could just cultivate aversion, anxiety, even a dislike of the meditation practice. It can create very strong emotions, strong negative emotions. So for a beginner meditator, you have to know your limits and be able to push them, but not try to break through your limits. Not go beyond your limits. So when the pain gets truly unbearable, where you're just not able emotionally to handle it, it's fully reasonable to have the meditator move. So be mindful, lift your foot up, move it. Eventually, through repeated practice, the meditator will become more patient and more able to stand with the pain. As long as we understand that our goal is to become invincible to any situation, any state, it's up to us how quickly we're going to get there. So we can admit that we're not able to deal with it, the pain, without taking that as a dogma, that when pain arises, it is proper practice, or it is the path to enlightenment to avoid the pain. Understanding that eventually you will cultivate tolerance and patience and objectivity to the extent that the pain no longer bothers you and you no longer have to move. The second reason is that there are certain cases where pain is a sign of something, where it is a sign that you are about to break your leg, for example. You're about to sprain your ankle or your leg, or you're about to cause injury to yourself. And obviously in those cases, it's, you know, your back injury. Some people have back problems. If they were to continue sitting, it might actually injure them. If you have a case for that, first of all, you have to be clear that you're not just making excuses, or you're not just a hypochondriac. If you actually have some prior injury, many people come to meditation with plates in their legs or their joints or in their backs or so. I know serious injuries. Now, these people can, in certain cases, reasonably should, in certain cases, change their position. That's the other situation where it's actually going to harm you. You can make a case for it. Now, you can also make a case for just sitting through it, letting yourself go. There's the case of Chakupala, who did walking and sitting meditation, even though he was, in order to heal his eyes, he was to lie down. Instead of lying down, he just did walking and sitting for 3 months, and his eyes were destroyed. He went blind as a result of his extreme practice, but he also became enlightened. So, as a means of letting go, one can even let go of one's own physical well-being. There's certainly nothing wrong with that. Now, it's important. The idea of extreme asceticism. The question is, well, then what is that? Extreme asceticism is the concept that there's some benefit to hurting yourself. That pain is somehow intrinsically beneficial. That pain is somehow a means of inflicting pain upon yourself. Somehow leads to enlightenment. It doesn't. Objectivity leads to enlightenment. So the ability to stay patient in regards to pleasant sensations, pleasant situations, and patient in regards to unpleasant situations equally, that is what leads to enlightenment. The extreme practice is thinking that there's some benefit in either pleasant or unpleasant situations. Both of those are extreme. There's no benefit in either. There's only benefit in being objective towards them. So it's quite a clear teaching. I don't think there's any reason to be confused about it. Hello, Bante. From some of your videos, I have seen that you have said that not sleeping is healthy. I'm confused, really. Isn't sleeping for at least a few hours a day, for a few hours per day, very useful for both physical and mental health? Please explain. In most cases, yes. It's really a function of your state of mind. If your mind is in a chaotic state, then you need more sleep to take time out and to calm down. On the other hand, the sleep state of a mind that's in chaos is less restful, and well, yeah. So even more so, because the sleep state of a mind that is chaotic is the mind that is distracted, the mind that is turbulent. The sleep state of such a mind is less restful, and so it's actually exponential in a sense, or it's not just an inverse correlation. It's not a one-for-one. A person whose mind is calm, first of all, needs less sleep because they need less time to recuperate from the mental activities and even the physical activities, which are generally more restful and more calm and more peaceful. But also their rest time is more restful. So they need exponentially, to some extent, exponentially less sleep as a result. There's no sense that so there's no one answer. You can't say more sleep is better, or it's important to get so many hours of sleep, or more sleep is always better for everyone. Less sleep is always better for everyone. But a restful mind is better for everyone, and a restful mind needs less sleep exponentially. So if one's mind is perfectly balanced, and one's situation is such that one doesn't have doesn't engage in activities that will disturb that sense of calm, then there is no need to. So there might be no need to sleep at all. So in the case of Chakopala, this monk who didn't sleep for 3 months, and that's not a unique case. It's actually a sort of a practice where people will not sleep for many days, but you have to understand that they're in a state where their minds are so peaceful, so clear, so calm, that they don't really need the sleep. What would you need the sleep for if your mind and your body are rested? The body doesn't need to lie down necessarily if it's calm, if it's in a restful. If you train it to be in a restful state, to be able to sit still, and so on. And certainly the mind doesn't either. The brain doesn't either if the mind is calm. So it has all to do with one's state of mind. I'm 18 and feel that I'm too young to follow the monk path and work towards nirvana. Wouldn't it be best for me to follow the materialistic path now temporarily until I reach old age before walking the nirvana path, as then I'd be more mature? Right. Well, first of all, many parts to this question. First of all, there's no need to ever walk the monk path. If you're really serious about it, then the monk path is a great one. Second of all, I think there's a misleading premise here that somehow physical maturity or age somehow implies better practice. I think in certain aspects of the practice are benefited by physical maturity in the sense of greater experience of the world. But a great portion or a great part of the path is actually hindered by age, because especially in someone who has spent most of their life following the materialistic path. So the materialistic path, if I understand it as, if you're meaning it as I understand it, is an unwholesome one. It's one that leads to clinging, it leads to conflict, it leads to delusion and attachment and identification, all sorts of bad stuff. And so when that becomes your habit throughout your life, the idea that would somehow make you a better meditator is unreasonable, is unlikely. Now, if you are talking about not becoming a monk for a long time, the idea that of practicing meditation and doing good deeds now to slowly cultivate enough goodness to become a monk, well, that's a different argument, but I still don't think it holds, because being a monk is even more difficult than practicing as a layperson physically and as a lifestyle. A person who has lived their whole life not used to the monastic discipline, the life of being a monk, will have a very difficult time in their old age practicing all of the many rules eating only once a day and so on. It doesn't get easier because you've waited a long time to begin it, right? So even if it's about becoming a monk, absolutely, the Buddha himself recommended that it's for young people to do. Ordaining when you're 20 is a perfect time, the best time. Even if it's difficult at first, for a person who's able to practice it, it's really the best time of one's life, because one's able to grow up as a monk, grow up surrounded by the Dhamma, surrounded by the Buddha's teaching. So certainly no benefit to walking the materialistic path. Well, I don't think any benefit if you want to become a monk for waiting until you're very old, or old at all, really. 18, well, you have to be 20 to ordain, and you might want to wait a little bit longer, but certainly don't ever follow the materialistic path. It's not useful for anyone in any situation. But as for following the layperson's path, that's reasonable. But don't think that it's going to make it easier to become a monk when you're old. It just might make you a bad monk. One of those monks who just sits in their room and watches television all day. Lots of questions. Meditating, I noticed that fabricating an I was feeling, etc., was untenable. There was only the experience. This seemed to clearly disprove the self. This notion is so fundamentally simple. Why then is it so elusive? My gratitude. Well, it's only elusive because we've cultivated a sense of self. We have a very strong sense of self as human beings. We are born with it. It's something we've cultivated lifetime after lifetime, but it's something we reaffirm throughout our life. The idea of this is mine, the idea of being given things, of identifying with things. When you recognize something, you desire it, and so you cling to it, and you get the idea that you're somehow in control of it. We cultivate habits of misperception, and it's not just identification with self, it's greed. There's actually no, if you think about it logically, there's nothing different between pleasure and pain, and yet we prefer one and abhor the other. Why is that? It's through misapprehension, it's through a misconception, misunderstanding about reality. It's only habitual. It's actually only you that's like that. There are people out there who aren't like that. There are people who are actually born with very little attachment to self. Now, most of us aren't so lucky, but it's when you say it being elusive, it's only elusive to you, and to most of us. But that's only an artificial. It's not natural. It doesn't mean it's natural to believe in itself. It just means that we've gotten so lost and so caught up in misunderstanding that we actually are born like this. It comes back to the idea that being human is somehow natural. There's nothing natural about having 10 fingers and 10 toes. It's a ridiculous situation that we're in, that we have to mash up physical matter, in certain types of physical matter in our mouths, and then have it pass down into our chests and be digested in our abdomens, and then excreted as smelly, awful fecal matter. There's nothing natural about that. Our whole existence, that we should have to bump into each other in order to procreate. In order for someone to be born, there has to be two beings of certain types coming together and having orgasms, and then the on the off chance that an egg and a sperm are going to get together. I mean, it's a ridiculous situation that we find ourselves in. There's nothing natural about any of this. So the view of self is it's one of the major glues that holds it all together. It's one of the major points where we could say this is where we went wrong, and yet we keep affirming it. We keep making the mistake and augmenting the mistake and cultivating that mistake. Now, for some people, it's not that case. They're on a path away from that. Especially those people who practice the Buddha's teaching and practice mindfulness meditation. They find themselves seeing clearly and realizing, oh, there's this horrible thing that we've gotten ourselves into, the situation that we've got ourselves into due to our misapprehension. So it's, in short, it's just because of your habitual misunderstanding. But once you start to read about it, it just seems so obvious, and you realize, oh, what an idiot I've been, right? So often when the Buddha would teach, at the end of the talk, people would say, it's like I was blind and now I could see. It's like something was turned over and you've just put it, like a piece of furniture was tipped over and you've just righted it for me. And now everything seems right again. That was quite common in the Buddha's teaching. It was just like putting things back in order, straightening out one's understanding about reality, because we get crooked otherwise. We get lost and confused and tied up in knots otherwise. In our meditations, should we eventually drop all labels when we note phenomena that are occurring, and just observe the phenomena for what they are? Is labeling experience with language a kind of judging that should eventually be dropped? Depends who you ask. I've answered this question many times. I go by the school that says it should never be dropped. I've answered this before. I'm not sure if it's worth actually. So I'll answer it again. Right, so you have to understand the theory behind meditation. The meditation theory is that you practice a artificial type of mental cultivation until the point that a spark is ignited and one enters into a state of absorption. This is, very simply put, how we look at meditation in Theravada Buddhism. So there are two types. One, if you're focusing on a concept, you artificially apply yourself to the object. So if it's a flame, you say to yourself, fire, fire, or flame, flame. If it's a color, like the color blue, then you say to yourself, blue, blue, and you stare at the blue. And you do that constantly. Eventually, you don't have to look at it. You can just see it here in your mind, but you still continue to say to yourself, blue, blue, blue. And you do that until you enter into what is called the jhana, a state of absorption. With insight meditation, the same thing occurs. The same practice is expected, except the object is ultimate reality. So instead of saying blue, blue, or fire, fire, one would say seeing, seeing, or hearing, hearing, or pain, pain, or walking, walking, or happy, or thinking, or so on. But the artificial, the artifice continues until one enters into absorption, except now the absorption is based on insight, so it actually is the realization of enlightenment. At the moment that one becomes enlightened and enters into the absorption that is the realization of Nibbana, or yes, realization of Nibbana. Until that point, one can't give it up. At that point, then one gives it up. But up until that point, one is expected to continue with the practice, because it's the practice that is cultivating clarity of mind. The idea that somehow labeling an experience could be a kind of judgment, I think that's a very difficult argument to make. I think it's really, really it's not a very good argument. I'm sorry to put it bluntly. I don't have the language to make that sound any better, but Why it's not a very good argument? Because the implication is that judging is wrong, and if judging is wrong, then you should never have cultivated in the first place. So the fact that you're accepting the fact that it should be cultivated in the first place suggests that it couldn't be judging at all. Any kind of judging would be, is in the Buddha's teaching, bad. It's unwholesome. So you should never judge at all whatsoever. But, so that's the first thing that's wrong with that argument. The second thing that's wrong with it is the idea that identifying something, you know, if I say, oh my God, that's seeing, that could somehow be a judgment, you know. It's like saying, oh my God, you're a person. You know, it's not a judge. I'm not judging you. You can't call me somehow discriminatory for calling you a person if you are an actual person. Oh, that wall is very white. No, what kind of a judgment is that? It's stating the obvious. It's stating the truth. And it's very much in line with the Buddha's teaching. So the idea that it's somehow a judgment is a very poor argument. The idea that it could get in the way, I know people like to argue that. I think it's something that shouldn't be an academic argument. It's something that you should put into practice. If you want to drop the noting after a while, fine. Go ahead. Go for it. That's not what I teach. My claim is that you're giving up the meditation. You're giving up a useful tool for a less strict, a less methodical, systematic practice. And I'm willing to bet that you're going to have a harder time becoming enlightened as a result, as opposed to staying systematic and continuing with the basic teaching that has worked and never shows signs of not working, as far as I can tell. And so it seems to me, usually this sort of argument is made sort of as a result of not liking the noting, finding it unpleasant, and generally because it forces you to see things that are unpleasant. From our interpretation is that it's doing its job. Once you practice in this way, you feel unpleasant, you feel impermanence, you feel suffering, you feel non-self, and I say, well, that's great. It's proof that this meditation works as it's supposed to, because it's forcing you to cultivate objectivity. It's forcing you to see things as they are instead of how you wish they would be. So instead of being comfortable and pleasant all the time, it's showing you reality and forcing you to change instead of trying to change reality. So that's my interpretation. Again, I've said this many, many times already. Okay, I think I'm going to stop there. I think an hour really is enough. So I know the questions are actually piling up. There's 77 of them now, but an hour does feel like enough time. So I'm just going to stop there. Thank you all for coming. Again, it's been, this starts to feel useful, so it's something that I'm hoping to continue. Maybe I can start something up on Sundays as well. Maybe there's something else we can do, have a Dhamma group or so on. But for now, this is good. I'll try to have another Dhammapada video up. I'll try to do more frequently. I don't know. We'll see. I will try, and I do have plans to do more videos. I've also started on my second book, so hopefully that will come out in the next... Hopefully that will come out before I go to Thailand. Who knows? Probably not. Probably it'll be a project for next year. But we'll see. Anyway, I've got it started, and I'll be publishing the chapters as they're done. So thanks for tuning in. Wishing you all a pleasant day and good practice and finding peace, happiness, and freedom from suffering. Be well.